Hello everyone, I'm Julia Eggles from Bright Kids Toy Guide, and I'm here today with Marga Gray and Lindy Thompson. And they're here because we are going to talk about bilateral integration, and these guys have got an enormous amount of experience working in that area. Now, just to introduce yourselves, guys, can you give us a little bit of background about where you're from and why you're so passionate about bilateral integration?
Because it has a really big effect on lots of different functionings, and you see it as from movements like from the very small child up to the sequencing things that the child has to do in school, like spelling and writing, constructing a sentence.
Yeah. So Marga and I are both occupational therapists that work with children, and we see them on a daily basis and how they're struggling with getting through their day and getting their tasks done. And a really important skill is being able to use your hands and the two sides of your body in a very coordinated way to get your jobs done.
That's pretty amazing that something like bilateral motor integration can have an effect on things like learning, isn't it?
Yeah.
How does that happen?
Well, do you want to talk about that one?
Yep. The development starts right when the baby, in the baby years. So first of all, the baby develops a sense of balance. So the two sides of the body work together to balance the child in the middle. So the muscles of the two sides of the body work together, then the child has a sense of balance. After that, they can sit. Then they learn to crawl. So with crawling, you get good sequential movements. The one hand and the opposite foot or leg work together to do a good crawling pattern. And if you see a baby that really crawls well, you can see that perfect bilateral integration and sequencing, because it's a rhythmical movement. It's really quite fast sometimes, and it's definitely the one arm and the opposite leg that works together. And
so there are problems if a child doesn't crawl really well, doesn't have good bilateral integration, then it can have an impact on development later in life, right?
It certainly can. If a child, children develop in their own time and at different phases, so we can't sort of pinpoint that, although you get your general guidelines. But we do see a pattern of children who don't crawl for a really long time. They don't establish that bilateral integration and sequencing the way that they should. So they just don't become familiar with the two sides of their body, their two arms and their two legs working separately, but still in a coordinated manner to get their functional jobs finished. So that will later on affect, the way that they can balance on one foot and use their two hands to put their pants on to get dressed, or to take their nappies off while they're learning their potty training. So you can see how if in those early stages they don't get that developed, that they just can't do the skills that are later on required, based on that early foundation.
Wow, that's really interesting. And I've heard that, I know that executive function, thinking skills, are really impacted by bilateral integration as well, aren't they? It really helps with organisation for thinking, yes?
Yes, it absolutely
and also,
does.
with the sequencing, it comes in like the sequential movements at first, but later on to construct a sentence with the words in the correct sequential order, but also sequencing tasks like rhythmical dancing is also impacted. So this, and even to remember a routine. So we see kids that can do most of the physical things, but it comes to a routine, they cannot remember their routine, and because of that, once they learn the routine and you change it, they really have problems to adapt to a new routine.
I can really relate to that. I was one of these kids.
Oh, really?
Oh,
perhaps you can tell us more about that.
Oh, there's a few directors of musicals I was involved with that weren't too crazy about my dancing, let me just say that. Not well coordinated here, folks. So but we're not stuck with that poor bilateral integration. I mean, that's the really cool thing these days, right? I mean, we've learnt that the brain is really adaptable and changeable. So how do you help these kids that come to you with these problems? What are you doing?
Well, often our first point of referral is that the child is having difficulty with handwriting in the classroom. That's when they start school, that's when sort of the ears prick up and say, okay, well, there's something going on here. And then when you research it and do the assessment on the child and you go back to those early developmental stages, we start to see that, okay, handwriting's a problem because this child doesn't know their left from right. They haven't established that. Their brain, the sides of their brains aren't communicating with each other to say, this is my left and this is my right, and this is how we put it together. So we start and look at those early developmental stages, and often it's quite easy to pick up where there are gaps, and then we slowly start to stimulate the child in the right way and teach them the skills to be able to cross their midline, and make sure that their brain is communicating from both sides and organizing their behavior in the appropriate way.
Now, I know you guys have put together a fabulous program called CoordiKids.
Yeah, we are very excited about that. It's like, in our practice, we have had many success stories, starting, like Lindy explained, from the big movements to the cognitive or the thinking skills. And we've seen so many kids that went through the program that we used in therapy, but then the parents sometimes stop because they cannot afford more therapy, or it just becomes too much for them to come into therapy. And we didn't have a good set of exercises that parents could do at home. So what we did is we actually compiled a program with all the different exercises that we use in therapy, but we video recorded it to make it easy for parents to do at home. So it literally starts from the sensory phase of development, which has to do with all your different senses, and then the basic movement skills, and it builds the child's skills up to the stage where you get to cognitive sequencing, you get to motor planning, and you get to executive functioning.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like with bilateral integration that you have to do a program, but it's nice to know that something like this that can be a bit overwhelming. It's like, well, yes, I know I need to do all these bilateral activities, but how do I stagger it? How do I know where to start, where to stop, how long to do it? Really, you guys have put it together in such a way that it's done for the parents, right?
Yep, absolutely. We've wanted to make it easier for them. Instead of going on online and maybe finding information that's not as appropriate, they could follow this program. They don't have to think. Their child can watch the video, so the parent basically just has to sort of assist them with getting it set up, and then they're good to go.
Cool.
Yeah. So
does a child need to have problems in order to benefit from the program?
Certainly not. It will benefit any child because they could go through and practice skills that they've already got, or enhance other areas of their lives and their sports skills and that. But it certainly is focused on children who do have difficulty, so that they can go through those phases and make sure that they've established the right foundation.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
There's so much to this. What I suggest, guys, is that you go through the link that's on this resources page to find out more about the great program that Marga and Lindy have developed. Thanks for your time today, guys. I really appreciate it.
Lovely.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.